Hey everyone, welcome back to Sermon Rewind. Glad to have you with us. As you know, Sermon Rewind is a weekly web series that focuses on two things as best as possible. We focus on looking backwards to the sermon from the previous Sunday, and we focus on moving forward in application with regard to you, the viewers, questions that are given. This past week, we addressed Acts chapter 17, verses 1 through 16, and the big idea to follow was this. Ultimately speaking, the good news requires two responses from the church, preaching and receiving. So in a nutshell, when we are given the good news and we come to faith in Jesus, there are two things that are required from us, that we would receive the good news well and that we would make that good news known to the world around us. And so instead of looking at Paul's time in Thessalonica and Berea and simply saying the same old thing that we've already seen many times, that is, he preached and then there were responses, I decided to take us up to 30,000 feet so that we could glean from that experience things for us to move forward with in faith as well. So the 2 points that basically broke up the text were A, how the church preaches, and then B, how the church receives. And it's important for us to understand, I said a whole lot, so I'm not going to unpack all of that all over again, but it at least gives you some framework to think through what this first half of chapter 17 looks like. The question that came in from you, the viewer, I think is incredibly important for all of us to consider. Because one such strategy that Paul had everywhere he went was that he first and foremost spent his time and energy amongst familiar people. So Jews in particular, or God-fearers, Gentiles that believed in Yahweh, that were often gathering in the synagogue. And the reason that he went to them first was because, frankly, it was easier to talk to them. It was easier to build relationship with him. They trusted him. They gave him an opportunity to speak. And more often than not, they were going to trust the words that came out of his mouth as potentially the truth. So Paul utilized every opportunity he could to get the message out as simply and easily as possible. However, you, the viewer, ask this. How is it that we are meant to focus on people we are familiar with and have built trust with, while also imploring everyone we come into contact with the same? Meaning, how do we instruct and encourage and share the gospel with those who are maybe not so familiar or we don't have any relationship with so that we are able to practice both and not leave anybody out? Or are we just, as we heard on Sunday, supposed to only focus on the people we know, throwing everyone else to the wind? Obviously, the answer to that is no. We're not supposed to do that, right? Meaning, yes, we are to go to people we're familiar with, but we are also supposed to labor on, pray for, and preach good news to those that we are not. In fact, this upcoming Sunday, when we switch gears slightly at the tail end of chapter 17, Paul is going to go to Athens, the Areopagus, and he is going to speak to a bunch of people that don't know who he is, don't know anything of his faith, and in fact, have divided their faith among a million different philosophies and religions before them. So yes, there are times in which we have to practice both. As a strategy, however, get your feet wet and continually utilize every relationship the Lord has given you to preach good news first. And only then, when there are opportunities presented to you by His grace, should you reach out to those who have not yet heard, or more importantly, maybe not even yet heard of you. So I don't ever want to make it seem as though you have only been called to one audience, but I do want to make sure it's clear that you are not a Jehovah's Witness. You're not to be banging on complete strangers' doors and telling them about a Savior they know nothing about, and more importantly, telling them from the perspective of a person they've never met. We find that that is often fruitless. So as a strategy, first and foremost, stick to those people you know and the relationships you already have. But whenever the Lord calls you to it, by all means, share the gospel with all men, all women, all children, as He gives you the grace to do so. I hope this was helpful, friends. To be honest with you, I know that there's a lot more that can be said, but in the moment, think clearly, think faithfully, and present the gospel to those that the Lord has given you the grace to present it to. That's the big message. That's what we're called to, and I hope you are encouraged as you faithfully follow Jesus on mission as well. Look forward to seeing you soon.